like anahata is like, the name of the heart energy center, but it also means in Sanskrit it's unstruck, unbeaten,
Wow.
unbroken.
I find burnout is sure to happen
Yeah.
for anybody, man or woman.
The relationship can be a sanctuary for like, when I go out into the world, what is my interpretation of it when it happens? What does it mean about me when he hides? What does it mean about me when, he tells these little lies that, he thinks are fine, but actually it affects me in a deep way.
What's up, guys? No Nonsense Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Uresk. Today, I have my beautiful wife joining me again, Azimah Azmi Uresk, and she's here to join us for a conversation today.
Pleasure.
What's up, boo?
What up?
Today, I thought, knowing the work that you do, and you work a lot with women on their ability to experience pleasure in their body and sort of like reclaiming that ability. Some women that are shut off from their ability to experience and receive pleasure in their body. Could you just tell us a little bit about what that kind of work looks like before I kind of head into what we want to talk about today?
Okay, so I guide women through their relationship with their body and also their relationship with their emotions, their relationship to the sensations that come with the emotions across various life experiences, whether it is in relationship with their romantic partners or even familial relationships, work relationships, right? Because pleasure is, beyond the sexual expression as well as also receiving all the good things that are available to you in any given moment throughout whatever life experiences. And I guide women through that. And and also like honoring that within themselves, like all the stories underneath the emotions that inevitably come up across life experiences. And, most people want to grow and expand themselves, and in that path, oftentimes there are these like dragons in the way that ask for their attention.
Okay. And so when you say dragons, it's a lot of times like perhaps limiting beliefs, traumas, stories,
Fears,
particular shames that they may be dealing with and that are keeping them from, I don't know, achieving maybe a more fuller expression of themselves as women.
Or have them shrink. Have them shrink in, out of fear of what other people may think, out of fear of some perceived consequences as a result of their authentic expression.
Okay, cool. So can you just give us like I don't know, like an everyday example of what that could look like?
What do you mean? Can you give me?
Well, like where a woman may be shut off from experience, like she wants to experience this, but XYZ is in the way.
I've been running this 4-week masterclass series, and this is kind of on point to what we've been discussing. Is through my work with women, a very common theme is wanting to receive more within relationships, right? Because they find themselves overwhelmed and burnt out from constantly giving and giving and giving and giving, and also not having the voice or articulation abilities to ask for what they want, or they hold back from asking for what they want out of fear of the other person's reactions, out of fear of maybe their partner pulling away, hiding, withdrawing, or rejecting and abandoning them, right? And so I would say those are the dragons, right? Those preconceived ideas, or those stories that I already decide beforehand, before even having that conversation or discussion in like, this is what I want. There's already a decision that that's going to happen. And so that becomes the
I'm
dragon.
going to be met with this type of reaction.
And so I'm like, I'd rather not face this dragon, and it's better for me to stay over here where the dragon isn't at, and I'm just gonna
not deal with the dragon.
Yeah, and this is just
the
what
way
it is. It's just my life, and
right. And when you're talking about receiving, just for clarity, we're talking about like it could be emotional support, it could be more intimacy, it could be more sexual intimacy, it could be any kind of thing in those realms of things that would, like, I don't know, nourish or support the woman.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So just want to lay a little bit of context down, as you know, one of the things that I see, and you and I talk about this a lot, is what I would call women, particularly in like Western culture, that carry what's often called a masculine shield, right? And so they adopt a more masculine energy that's not maybe in essence who they really are deep down, but it's sort of a way to kind of get shit done, survive in a world that is asking them to be, to grind all the time, to go, 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 and to sort of take on the traits, more masculine traits, but really from like a wounded place, like taking on more masculine traits in a way to protect themselves.
Sure.
That blocks them, but in essence, they block themselves from being able to experience their more feminine essence that may be there, and creates maybe a distortion in the relationship between the two.
Yep.
Is this something that you see in your work a lot?
Yes, for sure. In that, knowing how all our energy systems exist within a symbiotic relationship, right? Any experience of past shame, or even, it's important to also acknowledge, like, I don't know any woman who hasn't experienced some kind of sexual abuse or sexual assault from a young age.
Right.
It's important to take that into account because it does shift our relationship to safety and also security within our bodies. And so it's like, of course, of course,
Right.
there's gonna be these shields, and of course, it's gonna be these built-in response to protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And what that means is oftentimes, like, the lower energy centers, your root, your sacral space, especially where it is the center of your creativity, it's the center of also financial flow, financial power, even, right? When that is shut off, they call it also like the low heart, and your heart space, your heart energy center is the high heart. And when this is affected, right, when this is shut off, closed off, right, the woman is not trusting of intimacy, not trusting of receivership, not trusting in that their femininity, their feminine essence is really going to be revered and honored, is going to affect the openness of their heart space as well. And that's why you see, also in like hookup culture, right? There's this notion that it's okay to not have any emotional attachment. Let's just be numbed out over here and be open over here. But then also it's also limited. So there is this symbiotic relationship between the high heart and the low heart, in that even if this is open-ish, if there's a shutdown over here, it's not the full expression, and vice versa.
So what I'm hearing is there, early experiences that shut people off from a sense of being able to trust a more masculine energy, and so because they don't trust that, they end up closing off the feminine part and sort of adopting these traits as a way to protect themselves. Is that?
I would agree. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In essence, you're still protecting your heart space and also protecting everything. Your more intimate, more vulnerable parts of you, because it's scary to think about like that space being exploited or violated again, especially with someone who has experienced early experiences of trauma.
Yeah, I think because I notice in my work, like I work with quite a few females as well. More often than not, this is a thing that women do come to me for, right? And how I experience them is they've trained themselves, or at one point in their life, they convinced themselves, all right, I'm going to do the career thing, and I'm going to like be really successful, and I'm going to grind, and I'm going to grind, and I'm going to grind, and they do it, and they do it well, and they achieve some level of career success, financial success, and they find themselves burnt out. They find themselves unfulfilled, and there's a certain yearning for like to be more in like a softer place where they can receive. And like oftentimes there's an understanding that they want that, but a fear of like letting go of the safety and protective mechanism, right? The fear of letting go of the grind, the fear that, man, I might have bought into something like that came from a really wounded place, and now like going back and looking at potentially living my life a different way, or softening, or not having such a guard up, can be really, really terrifying to them.
And I think too, there's a question that often doesn't get asked when it comes to like, okay, recognizing these things that aren't really working for me, in a in alignment with like what I want to grow into, right? That growing into being in a place of like receivership, and I can just relax and soften into my feminine essence or my feminine expression. I think the question that doesn't get asked often is like, what do I get out of like insisting that I have to keep these masculine shields up?
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I get to be right about, like, for me, this is my own like personal experience. Like, I get to be right about this story that men can't be trusted.
Right.
Like, I get to be right in this story that men can't really fully honor what a woman needs, right? Based on my own experience and my growing up and seeing how, my mom and dad interacted, or even seeing within like my culture,
right,
how men were showing up to women and vice versa. And so I get to be right about all those things. But when I get to be right about all those things, I also take away any other possibility of like something else to happen.
Yeah. I think, and I see this all the time. Like anytime me, you, anyone is insistent upon keeping a story alive, right?
Yeah.
As a belief system, they will experience that story no matter what. Like they will find evidence of the story that they hold true no matter what.
And it feels so fucking powerful. It's like intoxicating sometimes.
Yeah, to be right about your story.
Right, exactly. I'm like, you know what? Like, I feel so much like, there's this like surge of energy.
Yeah.
And, that's also complemented by all these like songs, by all kinds of artists that are on that same energy of like saying like, fuck man, blah, 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 and it's like, it's almost like glamorized to reject that receivership or like opening. It's almost glamorized to be the bad bitch that doesn't need a man.
It's a real hard energy that comes from that type of like the the Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, whatever. There's a bunch of these like female artists now that like make a specific genre of music that is like, it's overly sexualized, right? It's very hard, it's very based in hustle culture, get your money, fuck these dudes, right? And like we don't need
seduce and scheme.
Seduce and scheme, right? Really, yeah. And it's like, it really does come from such a wounded place, it seems like.
Yes, and don't get me wrong, I still bust down to those songs. But I can't be listening to that all the time because it does do something to me as far as like I notice like how more like spiky I am with you, and that's where I feel like it's important for women to recognize where their leadership lies too, right? Like back to my point earlier of the high heart, low heart, women have a very young, active, dominant heart energy.
Okay, so for the people that aren't into like Chinese medicine or anything like that, what is
yang? Yang is the opposite of yin. I'm sure everybody has heard of yin and yang, right? Yang is the more active, more outward, more expressive, right? That's why you see when like women haven't seen each other in a long time, it'll just be like,
Yeah.
all these like screaming, everybody will like embrace. Whereas like on the other side, like men, if they haven't seen each other for years, they'll just give each other a dap or,
Yeah.
like a hell yeah, brother. But
Yeah.
it's almost like muted. The expression is like very muted. And that's the difference
Right.
between men and women, as far as like heart energy centers, and then our sacral energy centers, our sexual energy centers. Men are more young, right? That's why your genitals like protrude
Right.
out of you, right? Whereas women are the opposite, right? Our genitals are a lot more hidden. And for women, our heart energy centers, our breasts protrude out of our body. That's like a representation of the
That makes
yin
sense.
and the yang and the opposite sides, right? And I talk about feminine leadership is because it's important to recognize that our emotions are our superpowers,
Right.
almost like our ability to express our emotional capacity as women are our superpowers. And with that great power comes responsibility, as I quoted Uncle Ben. But it's important to recognize that, right? Because unconsciously, I think we tend to weaponize our emotions.
Yeah.
Right? The same way.
What does that look like?
Like ranging from withdrawing love, going cold, ghosting, right? Giving the silent treatment in order for you to act right, or like I lash out.
Yeah.
If I like bury it enough and then you piss me off one time and I lash out emotionally, whatever. I know that, in the past, my words have been used to cut people really deep, right? Even though I don't have the physical strength to overpower most of my male relationships, I can use words. I've, seen it happen between me and my dad. I've seen it happen between me and my brothers. I've seen it happen between me and you.
Yeah.
And that's where I use that emotional weaponry, right? The same way that as women have experienced, men creating like sexual abuse or like violation through the genitals. We do the same with our heart space, with our emotions, and use that emotional weaponry.
Yeah.
And so it's important to know that, yes, your emotions are valid. Your emotions are, real to you. They get to be honored and tended to. But there's a difference between acting out and acting upon.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to know the difference and also get honest with ourselves when we're leading to one side or the other.
Right. Okay. So, acting out and acting upon. I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but like, just help make the distinction between those two. So, woman's got some we'll say challenging emotions coming up, right? And if she is shut off from how to express those in a way that is more conducive to we'll say a healthy relationship or just a healthy communication dynamic, what does it look like for her to process that need that's coming up in her, whatever challenging emotions are coming up within her?
Can you give me an example of a challenging emotions? Because there's so many. So I can like narrow down.
Well, so as I'm saying this out loud, right, here's what I often see, right?
Okay.
So, on the topic of like a masculine shield, right? When the woman is shut down from being able to ask for what she wants because she maybe perceives asking as weak, right? Or asking can be really vulnerable to her, and maybe have her feeling like it's subject to make her, she could get hurt like that, right? And maybe this is happening unconsciously, but she doesn't want to ask for a particular thing to get met, yet she's angry that the need is not being met, right? Because she can't ask for it. She is unable within herself yet to, or unwilling to ask for help. And so, but she does want support. And there's all this stuff inside of her, and then it spills out perhaps into her relationships or her interactions with other people, right? What would acting upon that look like instead?
Okay, so we know the acting out would be the shutdown, the slamming shit, the passive aggressive behavior that I'm sure all of us have experienced at some point. But acting upon would be taking that pause, right? Creating the space between whatever it is that, maybe it's like triggering her or is creating that response. Just creating space, whatever, like, and how what we do in that space are self-regulation things, right? Anything in relation to the nervous system that gets us from that fight or flight, heightened reactive mode into, okay, maybe journaling, where I get to, maybe just like free write all the things that I'm pissed off about, right? It doesn't have to be this like, oh, love and light, gratitude, affirmations, like stuff like that. Those things are helpful. But in this case, sometimes it's important to give that emotion a voice. And I like using pen and paper because it like creates like literal physical space. Instead of it floating around in my head and in my body, it's on paper.
Okay.
Right. And there's a start, beginning, there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Right. Or it can be, for some people, it's meditation. So for some people, it is going out in nature and just like putting their phone at home and like putting aside all this stimulation through electronical devices and just like being outside and connecting with their senses, right? Some people it's movement, some people it's dance, whatever it might be. Create that space to like, okay, instead of being in this like heightened mode, I'm back here, like in my body, I'm like regulated, and I'm able to see like, okay, this is why I'm feeling this way, right? This and this happened, and that created this experience of anger, right? Okay. I'm not wrong for being angry.
I just want to put this into like my own words, right? It's like I'm seeing there's a need to notice the stimulus, we'll say, right? Notice the emotion that's coming up, whatever it may be, right? Maybe it's noticing the thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations that start to accompany, we'll say, feelings of anger, right? As you notice that, right? Instead of just projecting it outward into your relationships or the world, take a pause to reflect on what's actually happening for you, right? Where is this coming from? Right? And the way that I put language that is like, take responsibility for what is inside of you, right? So that doesn't mean it's your fault, right? But you are responsible for what you do with what's inside of you, as opposed to it just happened because these circumstances happened. I had no self-awareness and I spilled it out onto some poor asshole that just happened to get caught in my path, right? And so what you're suggesting is to pause, reflect, and take ownership over what it is that you're experiencing.
Exactly. And then it comes, the acting upon is the action step, right? The nurturing action step. For example, an emotion like anger, right? Anger is often, your body's way of communicating that I matter, and okay, how can I advocate for myself?
That's interesting. So, and I think that's a great way to put it, because oftentimes anger comes up when I feel like I haven't mattered in a situation and I want to signify, hey, I matter, right? It can even be in traffic. Somebody cuts you off and it's like, hey, did you not see me?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that the anger of the feeling of being unseen, right? And then like what comes out with that. And it's like a way to signal like, hey, I'm here, right? And people do that to varying different degrees.
I think like, deep inside, like we know when lines have been like crossed as far as like what feels good for me and what doesn't feel good for me, right? And just as we have been conditioned to, whatever that first reaction may be, sometimes it's not the most healthy thing in relationship, and oftentimes like things are gonna just happen, right? Because it drives the bus subconsciously, usually for everybody, right? But
absolutely.
like in the path of healing and the path of wanting to create healthy relationships, it's important to continue to bring awareness to what happened, even if and we've had experiences of this before where I had reacted in an explosive and unhelpful, inconducive way for a relationship, where afterwards I've had to like sit down and be like, oh yeah, that was like my anger driving the bus, and I did not get the chance to catch it yet. And
Absolutely.
so over time, in consistently bringing that awareness time and time again, I think we increase the capacity to see it as it comes.
Right. Yeah. So, we're talking about this obviously in the context of women sort of taking on this harder energy in their life and the burnout and the things that are associated with that. Can you talk to some of the symptoms of this sort of, we'll say, masculine burnout? Like, what does that look like?
In what context? Like,
Just give me a full picture. What are the symptoms?
it can show up in many ways, I think, in my personal opinion. Like, physical manifestations can include like hormonal imbalances, which also, can be contributed to a lot of different factors. Yeah, physical tension and tightness. I work hands-on in like women's bodies and also internally within the pelvic bowl, and sometimes that even shows up within the pelvic bowl, and also yoni. Certain gynecological issues such as like vaginismus oftentimes have legs in, yeah, just the stories that we hold around receivership and softening. Um, Other manifestations of it can be, just feeling like a consistent need to like be in control.
Yeah.
There's this inability to just relax in like uncertainty or in spaces where they don't have all the answers, or
Right.
to let go of all the analysis.
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely see that a lot. And it's like, I'll see like relationship dynamics where the woman definitely wears the pants in the relationship and kind of bitches the dude out. And what I notice, particularly if I get to like talking to them or working with them in a one-on-one relationship, is that while that feels safe to the woman to be in a sort of distorted way, there's a distorted sense of safety in being in the driver's seat. She's often unfulfilled, right? She's often unable to rest, right? She's often burnt out, right? She often feels a tremendous burden to go, 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 and is unable to replenish those energy centers because like taking time to rest would ask her to step out of the driver's seat.
And also, like, I see this a lot too, of like, there's an interest, a desire to, lean into certain activities that make them feel good, like maybe like dancing or
Right.
like attending certain like community events and showing up for their friends in this way. But then they end up being flaky because there are like other things that they got to take care of instead of like relax, right? No,
Right.
I got to do this.
Right. So more goal-driven stuff than just like things that take the place of just things that just nourish them.
Like things that are just like pleasure for pleasure's sake.
Pleasure for pleasure's sake. Yeah, dude. I think for anybody that's really important. Like I noticed this even with myself. It's like it's really important to do things that are fun, pleasurable, relaxing for just the sake of themselves. Like not that they have to lead to something, not that they have to be building upon something or some way that I'm maximizing my schedule and optimizing, and this just constant need to optimize and be moving towards something all the time. I don't think that's healthy for anybody.
No.
Right. And but particularly when I see women stuck in that and they start letting go of, these things that sort of take care of their inner condition and, play for the sake of play's sake, whatever that looks like. And I think it's damaging. It's like, it's in essence being really hungry, but opting for fast food instead of something that's actually going to take care of your body.
Yeah.
Out of a sense of convenience, right? Or a sense of not enough time.
Yep.
Right. There's a sense of urgency or rushedness that happens, and it has people, men and women, giving up the things that actually would take care of them for the sake of speed or the sake of I need to get here.
Yeah, and I think that is, that also mirrors a lot of the male experience as well, of like this fear of like receiving at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
In a sense, also like a feminine shield to like what it might mean if you indulge in more pleasure for pleasure's sake that doesn't get you anywhere, that doesn't like even get you the applause from your boys, and it's just like, oh no, just fucking relaxing and taking off, just letting your guard down a little bit and just relaxing into whatever presence, or pleasure, or play,
Just being, right?
just
It's like
being.
just step out of the
It doesn't have to
doing.
go anywhere.
And yeah, stepping out of just everything has to be so goal driven. Like, yeah, I think goals are great, obviously, and I think
Mm,
it's important to have a focus and a purpose and all that stuff. But if that's 100% of the time, always on,
mhm.
um, I find burnout is sure to happen
Yeah.
for anybody, man or woman. And as I think about this, right, I think about the role that men play in all this, right? So, as a lot of women have chosen to harden or move in a more masculine direction, right? You see men often moving in a very different direction, right? Men actually moving towards a more feminine space, but usually from a wounded place. Lack of emotional control and things like that, and it's like that whole sense of safety, like it started with usually a poor experience with the masculine, right? And it's like, man, I think, yeah, women have their own work to do, but I think men also have such a huge part to play in this. And like
Mhm.
our ability to create emotional safety is the thing that is going to also help support the women in your life
Mhm.
to move into that more rested space, to
Yeah.
move into that more relaxed space, to be able to live from a sense of love rather than a sense of hustle culture or grind.
Mhm.
Like I think if a woman really does have a feminine core, like hustle culture and grind has a very short shelf life for her before it starts to hurt her
Mhm.
in some way.
Yeah. I believe that it kind of also like goes against her own cyclical nature.
Yeah.
To constantly be on the grind there, like that. It just goes against what we are built in
Yeah.
to really nurture and nourish and recognize that, like, yeah, we are cyclical in nature. There are times when literally in our bodies our energy is gonna be low,
Yeah.
and like, there's PMS and all these things. Usually in the time of our luteal phases and menstrual phases, it's where we get more emotional. And that, I think, is an invitation from our bodies to slow down
Mm.
and be with the things that are coming up,
Yeah.
right? Our bodies are literally embodying, right, the letting go, the shedding process in the uterine lining when
Right.
we menstruate. And that's like, of course, this is going to be some emotional stuff that
Right.
needs to be processed
Yeah.
and moved out. And then following the menstruation process, the follicular stage and the ovulation process, where we're like building energy a lot more
Mm.
outward. And that's where I do the best work as far as communication, as far as putting out projects, as far
Right.
as physical exertion.
Yeah.
My strength training would would be, and like, even jujitsu would be like so fucking strong
Mhm.
and powerful during those phases. And I start seeing it taper off. And that's where I'm like, okay, a lot more inwards rather
Mm.
than outwards. And
Right.
I think it's super, super important to honor that instead of reject
Yeah.
that
Not
within
just
us.
honor it, but even leverage it. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like sometimes I think, you know, fortunately for me, like I've heard you have similar conversations about this stuff. So
Mhm.
like I'm not an expert by any means, but I have at least enough education to understand that, like, your cycle is not something to be hated.
Mhm.
Sure, you're gonna hate it if your idea of like living is that you got to be on the grind all the time and that you view your cycle as holding you back.
Mhm.
Yeah, I could see how you're gonna resist it and not like it or think that it's some sort of weakness, right?
Yeah.
But um, as you're talking about, yeah, the stage where you're shedding and letting go, and that's when all the big feelings are coming up,
Mhm.
right? Well, yeah, you're also letting go. There's an emotional letting go. It's like,
Yeah.
what have I been holding on to that is also being let go? What is unprocessed in me that is also needs to be letting go? And how can I perhaps set up my life to best facilitate this? Doesn't mean you have to take off work for 2 weeks out of the month,
No.
but understanding and maybe changing your targets or your intentions, probably being a little bit more present, right, to
Yeah.
what's happening and what's needed. That's actually what sounds like happens the most is there's an ignorance or an ignoring of what's actually needed uh, for oneself when they're moving through their cycle. Does that sound like it's on par?
Yeah, and it has so many legs and so many different things, right? And like across a lot of religions, the menstrual blood is seen as like dirty, or
Right.
and you know often kind of like this feeling of like being like cast out
Mm.
because you're bleeding, and
Yeah. Women can't even go in like the temples, right? If they're
temples, mosques,
yeah.
like, well, there are reasons behind it, right? But um there's also the, I guess, the shadow element of like how it is perceived or understood, is that, or like not good enough,
Right.
or not worthy, right? However, also the, I think, essence of it that, I'm starting to like come more and more into is that, yeah, this is a time for you to be resting
Mm.
and to be inwards rather than seeking outside of you,
Yeah.
right? And I think a lot of just dissonance happens when we ignore this fact, right? Like for me personally, I know that in my teenage years and my like young like early 20s, when I would ignore my body's needs for rest, like it it resisted even more,
Yeah.
right? It showed up in more painful periods, like prolonged bleeding
Mm.
experiences, and also like really, really, really heightened like emotions that would usually result in some kind of explosive
Yeah.
shit.
That makes sense.
You
You're ignoring the needs that are like screaming, right?
Yeah. And I do recognize that, now I'm at a place where I'm able to, like, if I want to take off for like the 3 to 5 days that I'm bleeding, I can.
Mhm.
I know that that comes from a place of privilege, but then also it's still important to recognize that, that is going on, that instead of like, oh, taking on all these extra tasks, let's say I'm
Right.
working under an employer and I have all this and this and that, it's like, okay, some things I can't really get away from, right? If there are certain tasks that I'm responsible to show up for, yeah, but then honoring that, okay, maybe after I'm done with these tasks, I'm gonna go in and tend to myself. I'm gonna, make myself nourishing meals. I'm gonna, maybe instead of going out late night and coming back at midnight, I'll come home a little later so I can honor my rest and sleep during this time.
Mhm.
Um, it's, recognizing that is there,
Right.
and that, I can lean into my cyclical nature, and that is okay for me to do so, and it doesn't take away from my power or my strength
Right.
to do that. Um, and I don't necessarily need to compare myself to my male counterparts, because we just run on different things that our body asks for.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what are some ways that men can support women to move into a more into a softer resting energy, just in general in life? What are some things that just come off to the top of your head, in ways that where can men improve? How can they support? What are the things that you see in that area?
I think it's just getting curious, getting curious instead of like assuming that you know the answers or like ways to fix this problem, right? I think like oftentimes when women come to men asking for support, they don't necessarily um, want answers to fix, unless of course it is like um, explicitly said otherwise. I think what women desire is to just be listened to,
Hmm.
you know. Um, Outside of, I think it's also like important that a woman has her own community to like process a lot of these
Yeah,
things,
absolutely.
but like also coming from a place of curiosity, um, an acknowledgement that there are certain times of the month where, your
Yeah.
emotions are going to come online a lot more. A lot of the things from the underworld are coming up to the surface,
Yeah.
right? And asking if, what she might need in order to feel supported. I can't say for sure, because sometimes, the support is leaving her alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes the support is like, you know, um, actually being there to listen and
Mhm.
whatever. Sometimes the support is um, that little loving accountability nudge. Like you said you were gonna take care of yourself today. Why are you diving into this mountain of work instead of booking yourself a massage?
Yeah.
You know, like little loving nudges like that. I
Hmm.
don't think it's around like what you can do for them unless
Hmm.
it's explicitly like
Right.
said, right? Like, Eric, I need your help to take out the recycling today,
Yeah, and I think
like
when I say do, right, it's like, well, what work? Like, because oftentimes what's going to happen, right? I know that this is true for this has been the case for me in the past, and a lot of guys that I talk to. To be curious, right, is to know your woman more fully, right? To understand, maybe understanding her cycle more fully, understanding what comes up for her with difficult parts of her life more
yeah.
fully, right? And so by understanding her alone, you're going to support her. When men don't know something, right, oftentimes there's going to be a fear, right? There's a fear of inadequacy that I can't figure this out, right? And they haven't, maybe they haven't been taught how to be curious about a woman, how to deal with their own emotional processes that come up when they're unsure about something, right? So if you're going through something and I take it as a sign that I'm inadequate because you're going through something, right? That's something that I have to work on. I've got to work on the sense of inadequacy that comes up in me.
Yeah.
Because what happens, right? Like let's say I have no self-awareness, right?
Okay.
Now, I'm feeling inadequate. I don't know that I'm feeling inadequate. I just know that I don't like the feeling of inadequacy. So what do? I make you wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking crazy bitch. It's a fucking period. You know what I mean? And but that's so easy to do when you're unaware, right?
Yeah.
It's like have an uncomfortable feeling, take no responsibility for it, and blame the other person.
Yeah. Or
Right.
like, pass it off as like humor and like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about, right? It's like I think that's our job. Our job is to deal with our reactions, because if we're reactive based off uncomfortable emotions that come up as we're learning to navigate our relationship with a particular woman or women, immediately that sucks any safety out of the union, out of the relationship, right? And that's going to leave the woman much more apt to go cold, to harden, and protect herself, right? And I think the last thing a woman needs when she's in some tougher, tumultuous emotions is to harden,
Yeah.
right? And go into protection mode, right? So it's like, the question that we have to ask, I think men, like I would encourage you guys to ask yourself is, do I want my wife or my girlfriend or my daughter feeling like she needs to protect herself in my presence? Right? Is my job not to protect her? Well, does that go? Yeah, of course it is, right? But I think when people say protection, they're usually thinking physically and financially.
Or fixing.
Yeah, or fixing, right?
All the problems.
Yeah, fixing all the problems. But it's like, no, it's not just physically and financially. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's our job to do that. I think it is also our job to create emotional safety, protect our women emotionally, and create a safe space just in the home and in general, right? That where like where the woman is safe to go through her process. Like, yeah, she doesn't mean she gets to attack me or be, or be mean or cruel. But I get to create that sense of safety for her to go through that, for her to go through her challenges.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Right. And that's not to say to like protect her from all the things that the world might, bring to her, what she might encounter that might create those reactions. But it's like, okay, knowing that that's like a safe space to come to when you go out in the world and navigate all these challenges.
Yeah.
Right. That I don't know. I don't know what it's called, where, kind of like a safe zone where you can like come back to.
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary, exactly. It's the relationship can be a sanctuary for like, when I go out into the world and I'm like, okay, knowing that I am supported emotionally when I come home, like I can go out and like navigate the world the best that I can and still have my heart open, and knowing that I risk getting hurt by, if I, let's say, use my voice in a bigger way than I used to before, where I'm really advocating for myself and advocating for what is true for me. And even if there's pushback that, I still need time to process and figure out, I can go back into the sanctuary to like maybe have a like really helpful and nurturing dialogue
Right.
that supports me with somebody that I can rap with and like get some clarity so that I can go back out in the world and like, yeah, now I have like extra sauce
Yeah.
to put into the world for
Yeah.
like a better term.
Yeah, I think it's like, in the most simplest way possible. It's like, okay, like how do we get on the same team and take advantage of each other's strengths and weaknesses at times, right? How do we support one another in our high and low points and recognize that it's not always going to be just this like 50-50 split down the middle of like, and that we don't need to be the same.
Yeah.
That, the way that you process things might be very different than the way that I process things, and that's okay. Now, that doesn't mean, and I might need to learn about that because I might not understand it. It might seem so foreign to me, and I think it does seem foreign to a lot of men. And I think when it seems foreign to a man and he makes the woman wrong because he doesn't understand, right? Again, it's not helping her soften. It's not helping her rest or relax or be at peace. It's probably going to drive her further into it's like, I don't want that in my life. I don't want that for my woman. It is my job to learn these things. And I get it. Like, I had a lot of misunderstanding and anger about learning these things. I didn't think it was necessary. I thought it was completely irrational and illogical to operate like that. But then what I'm basically saying is you need to be like a man.
What led you to turning the tide into like more wanting to understand?
Well, what I was doing wasn't working. Right? Like, so to be fully honest, it really just came from a sense of it wasn't working.
Yeah.
It wasn't working for me, and it wasn't allowing me to show up in the relationship the way that I wanted to.
Right.
Right. So, okay, if I'm really honest with myself, and I think that's a lot of times what it takes is like really being brutally fucking honest with yourself. Okay, I actually don't know how to handle it when my wife goes through these hard emotions, and I take responsibility for her emotions. I feel like I have to fix it. I feel like I'm going to be abandoned, and so I'm doing all this out of self-preservation, and I don't know that that's why I'm doing it. Well, I got to take responsibility for that. Okay, so my self-preservation is creating a reaction in me that is either to avoid, withdraw, or lash out or react in some way that is not, we'll say, not healthy and not productive and not very loving either, right? I'm acting out in a way of fear.
Yeah.
Okay, could look a bunch of different ways, right?
Either.
You can leave, you can avoid, you can yell, right? You can make wrong.
Yeah.
You can tell the person that they're crazy. You can do all that stuff. All that's coming from fear. All right. If I'm choosing to every day do my work to live a life that's more based on love and more based on community and taking care of the people around me, then that reactive way of doing things is not conducive to what I actually want to create. I have to take responsibility for that. So does every man out there that's in a relationship. And so does every woman out there. Like, women are, all these dynamics between men and women, everybody is responsible. Right? Everybody is responsible. It is so fucking easy. Yeah, men do this, and these fucking bitches, they do this. And it's like, yes, all of us are doing these things, right? And, it doesn't matter how we got here. It really doesn't. It doesn't. Sure, we can take a look at it. It matters in so much as maybe we don't want to repeat those things, right? But we're all responsible. We're all responsible. Sure, there was a point in time where women needed men to protect them in a very real physical way. Yeah. Right? If we go back to like, ancient times, or like when we're like hunter-gatherers and stuff like that, we'll say it's very likely that the physical prowess of the man was needed for protection, and that the women were coveted for their ability to reproduce and nurture, and so they were, meant to be protected in a certain way. That has definitely been abused over the course of history, right? And so, okay, so that then, women weren't allowed to vote, and they were definitely treated like property for a long time, and a lot of like not cool shit happened. Okay. Horrible, even grievous things happened. I can understand a mistrust, right? I can understand why feminism needed to take place. I can understand that it was necessary, that all they could think of was, well, if we need to be heard, we got to act just like them. Right? That's all they're not going to listen to us as women. So we're going to take on this harder form of communication. but then it overshot the mark,
Mm.
right? And it's like, okay, whatever happened, whether you agree with what I just said or not, we are where we're at, right? It's not that if men just change, then women will be fine. That's not the case, right? It's everybody has their job to do to be able to move in a more harmonious way. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah.
So it could be easy, it could be funny to like poke fun at each other and laugh at the things that men and women do. And I think it is funny. Our differences are funny. I think that there can be there can be some levity to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? How it's sometimes just so different that we look at things and how ridiculous we might find each other at times. It can have some levity to it. That being said, it's like I think it is really important to seek to understand each other, right? Back to what you were saying at the beginning. It's so tempting to just want to be right.
Oh yeah.
It's so tempting to just want to make the other team, the other group wrong
Mm-hmm.
and maintain your rightness. Because if you're right, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, and it feels so powerful.
It feels
It's
very
like,
powerful.
You can touch me.
Yeah. I would encourage anybody out there that's like hearing this and has any sort of trouble with it or resistance to any of the dynamics that are being explained or just any of this conversation. It's just examine the need to be right. If you have a particular anger towards men or women, right, based off of your experience, take a look at how maintaining that position is working for you or not. And is it possible that there is another way to experience the opposite sex or experience yourself with the opposite sex?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Is it possible that the only reason you have that experience is because of the lens that you're looking at it through?
Yeah.
I am responsible for my experiences with women from a place of responsibility. I am responsible for that. I'm responsible for how I treat women. I'm responsible for the story that I hold them in.
Mm-hmm. And the same on my end too. Like I'm responsible for the way that I treat men, show up to men. Also like in like honoring them and their very human needs and human expressions and highs and lows and light and dark as well, And I think it's a reflection of my own relationship to all those things as they show up within men. Like the meat suit might be different, but at the end of the day, like a lot of our experiences of like that open close,
Yeah.
it's human,
Mhm.
And where do I not allow another's like humanity to exist? Like where I don't allow that to be is often a reflection of where I don't allow myself to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in that. I think there's a lot of power in like allowing people's humanness to be there, and that they're going to make mistakes, and just because mistakes happen is not necessarily a license for like this wholesale condemnation of a thing.
And it's not like, sometimes it's like I hear this talked about like loving everything, right? And sometimes it can really be really fucking hard.
Yeah.
You see a quality in, let's say, like your partner or like maybe your dad or like male relative of sorts, and you really fucking like have resistance to that whatever, like character flaw or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of resistance to it, but I think the point is not to like just like suddenly, oh, now I'm like in love with it, right? Like that would be kind of gaslighting to yourself to like what
It's not
you're
honest.
actually. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not honest, right? It's not honest. It's not authentic. It's not true. And so there's gonna be a pushback. It's like gaslighting yourself. But I think like the first step through all of it is just accepting it just for what is.
Yeah, accept what is, right? And then I would even go like a couple steps further, right? It's like, okay, I accept what's there. I accept that I see this thing in my father, and I really am challenged by when that comes up, right? What am I challenged by? I'm challenged by the hurt that I experience when I'm confronted with this part of him, right? And what is that hurt? That hurt is the way that I interpret that means about me in relation to this thing, right? And so,
and I feel like that acceptance just opens the door to like deeper conversation and deeper inquiry, right? Because the more I rejected it, or it's fucking closed,
Yeah,
right? But acceptance opens it,
absolutely. Yeah,
you know.
acceptance and curiosity.
Mm-hmm. And then curiosity, right? And how, like, what is it? What's the story I'm telling myself about me when that happens?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, what is my interpretation of it when it happens? What does it mean about me when he hides? What does it mean about me when, you know, he tells these little lies that, you know, he thinks are fine, but actually it affects me in a deep way.
Yeah.
Right.
I interpret it as I'm unlovable, I'm not worth telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, right? And then it's like, okay, and I see how that responds to me, right? And then I get to take a look at that from a deeper place.
Yeah,
get
and
to
I
be a
don't
little bit
have to
more-
like it.
Yeah.
I don't have to
No,
like
you don't
it.
have to like it.
I don't, you know, certainly don't have to love it, but I get to be honest with it.
Mhm.
And I think that is the most loving thing I can do for it,
Mhm.
you know. You know, and I think over time with like some of the like really, really difficult patterns, they can take some time, and like, cause it really has like its claws inside you,
Yeah.
right? And the blame and the pushback has felt like protection for so long, and which is why it's important to give yourself grace as you're navigating these really difficult things, and continue to nurture, continue to bring compassion to those parts of you that are still healing, that are still learning to forgive. And I think over time that just, you know, begins shifting that relationship
Yeah.
bit by bit.
Yeah, for sure. So before we wrap up, do you have like, I don't know, 2 or 3 things, suggestions that you could give to women that are recognize that they're burnt out? They recognize that they've been in a harder, grindier energy for a long time, and that they want to experience something different, and they just don't know where to go with that.
I think, you know, the first thing that came to mind as you were speaking was like getting support. Whether, you know, whatever that feels good and exciting for you in receiving that support, whether it is joining women's circles or little communities. I run, for those of you women in San Diego, I run a monthly women's circle. That's free, by the way. Joining some kind of community where, you know, it is possible for you to share your experience
Right.
in a safe environment where you won't be judged or criticized for it, right?
Yeah, they don't want to be feel wrong for where they're coming from, right? Or
No.
told that they should be a different way.
No.
I don't think that's going to be helpful.
No, that's like, you know, why would I go there if
Yeah.
I'm just going to be judged and criticized for it? Seeking support, right? Because
Yeah.
like your partner or the people in your life can't be the only source of like where you process stuff, right? Like, I know so many people who make their part, like put the role of the community into one person.
Yeah.
And it's just not fucking fair.
Yeah, yeah. Guys, that is like an intimacy destroyer. Is to make your partner your community.
Yeah. I agree.
And the place where you process everything.
Yeah. You wouldn't want someone to dump all the roles of community into you either.
That's a
right?
massive responsibility.
Yeah, I think like seeking support and community, and also practicing self-inquiry, practicing getting quiet or asking yourself these questions, or you know, seeing these experiences of emotions coming up following maybe a disagreement within relationship, or just noticing your inner resistance to opening up vulnerably, as a point of like inquiry of like, why? You know, where did this come from? Who told me that I can't open myself up emotionally, or who told me that I can't like soften, you know? And I think an important or helpful exercise is just like kind of like free writing your own perceived ideas, or what comes to mind when you think of the word feminine, or when you think of the word woman.
There's a lot of bias, right?
Yeah. This like exercise that I did with in my women's circle one time on the topic of pleasure. This was a February women's circle. I got people to list down words and things that come to mind when they see the word woman and when they see the word femininity or feminine, right? And it's very interesting what the results.
Oh, that'll tell you a lot, huh?
Yeah, it's like, okay, what does it mean to like be a woman in today's world, right? Oftentimes they list like kind of like roles and like even, you know, what we've learned growing up, what a woman is, right? Or what like the experiences that she has. And then like femininity a lot is more on like the qualities of like softening and receivership and all that, and just to see the contrast is like super interesting, right? Because I identify as a woman. These are all the struggles that come with womanhood, right? And then like whereas like feminine is like kind of like a broader term. It's like, okay, feminine energy is something that everybody carries in one way, shape, or form, and it has a particular like quality to it. There's a softening there. There's a I don't know how to describe it, but kind of like a deeper knowing to what that is and what that feels like. And it's important. It's cool to see the contrast to that as a point of inquiry of like, that's interesting. That my perceived experience of a woman is that it's unsafe. I'm going to be exploited. Too vulnerable. I don't have as much power as men.
Yeah, and as you say that, dude, this is what really drives me fucking crazy when people want to make comparisons about men and women, right? The power when a woman brings her love and her particular brand of love into any situation, right? And we'll say it's absence of fear, and she's just like, she's there in full love. It is a fucking powerful thing. It's very powerful when a man does it too. It's just different. Right? It's just different, and it looks different, and it feels different. But like, man, I never had that growing up. And so like when you're in the presence of it, like this sort of fearless mothering love or just the love of a woman is present, it's very powerful. I think it's one of, if not the most powerful forces on earth, right? So when women try to act like dudes to be as their version of strength, it doesn't feel honest.
Yeah.
And it a lot of times feels like it's coming from a hurt place. It's like, honey, you don't have to do that to be powerful. And you actually look kind of weak right now, right? But when a woman like trusts like that feminine love within her to come out, that feels honest and true, and there's nothing fake about it at all.
Yeah, it's that putting on versus being.
Yeah.
Right. I think the ripples of either way is very, very, very different. And also from like a self like co-regulation standpoint, that is felt.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to get a certain outcome in order to support this thing that I'm putting on, right? It's like whatever it is, it's like it's fine. I'm like untouched.
Yeah.
And funny enough, like Anahata is like, the name of the heart energy center, but it also means in Sanskrit it's unstruck, unbeaten, unbroken. And I think that is what we are in our core, right? Before all the stories, coming from like shame or just our own perception of, femininity or womanhood is through cultural norms and ideas does to cover up that truth underneath that.
That open-heartedness, right? It's like, there's I don't know that there's much that's more beautiful, right, than like a woman in her like open-heartedness, whatever that may look like at the time. So I think that's a good place to stop for today. So thank you guys for listening to the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed having it. Azimah, we'll obviously put all her information. Where can people reach you?
Through Instagram is the best way. Okay. My Instagram handle is iam.mightylight. That's actually a direct translation to my name, Nora Azimah. There's that on Instagram, and then there's also iammightylight.com, which is my website for if you were curious about any of my offerings.
Guys, she does answer like DMs for questions that you have. Not none of you thirsty motherfuckers trying to get a look at that butt. But yeah, if you do have questions for her, I know she does love conversating with women that have questions about
Men and women too.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been getting a lot of
Yeah,
men.
you do talk to quite a few men. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On their relationships
Yeah.
if they want to have a better understanding of their woman.
Yeah.
Really.
Cool. So we'll post all that stuff obviously underneath, so you can reach out and be curious about any of these things. And we'll see you guys next time.